Shalom, shalom. I'm Keats Ross, and that was Dakota Slim, my Audiomancy project song, Fess Up, Get Low, recorded some years back, and I'm still figuring out a way to release it. It might be on the upcoming audio sigil. But anyway, I just wanted to pop in here before this wonderful deep sea diver episode with Anthony Tyler, one that was recorded from a live stream released a few weeks ago. And I know it's taken me a while to get the wraparound for the audio podcast. I'm still figuring out the rhythms of my schedule and releasing these episodes, especially these pre-recorded ones and liminal streams. I did want to say, before this wonderful episode, which I'm sure everyone will get a kick out of, I had a little bit of an issue with my mic on the live stream. And, that's the wonderful dark nature of doing things live, where my mic volume might have been a little too clippy. So I tried to do my best to fix it. I don't think it's that distracting, but I did want to apologize. And this back end that it takes to create the audio podcast from live streams is something I'm still figuring out. And, amongst just finding my rhythms in this new place and this new career, and honestly, to be kind of forthwith about it, have been kind of fighting some mental health things as of late. Mainly just stresses about me not having the mental acuity and the fortitude to finish projects and creativity that I have been kind of sitting on, especially in regards to pre-recorded episodes and live streams. So I'm still working it out. I ask that you just be patient with me. Amongst other things, I have been working on Zozobra, which is my first nonfiction book, and I have been working on the audio sigil, which I think I can announce should be out August 21st for digital download. It took me long enough. A friend, I was talking to a friend once about all of these impending projects I have and relaying just kind of the stresses with it. And he remarked, he said, "Oh, there goes Keats and scope. He doesn't know scope." And that's always sat with me because I make a lot of, I think, announcements and promises that I do end up releasing. I always finish things. It just takes me a little longer than most. I'm not looking to be my bloody Valentine here and, take 4 years in the studio crafting a masterpiece. I just really want to get into a rhythm with my health, with my work, with my creativity, and I'm still finding that routine, especially battling, the other, which is this brain chemistry that can be oppressive at times. So thank you all for listening. You can still find stuff. I do still post on Patreon at patreon.com/PRAGMAGICK, and be on the lookout for some chapter drafts of Zozobra and some other fun stuff, videos. We have a tour diary in there from when we changed places. And yeah, sorry, I'm off the cuff here. Nothing scripted. But I just wanted to say thank you for everyone that's listening. And, don't be a stranger. Please continue to reach out to me. I know I might be a little bit late on getting back to some people. No, it's not you. It's me. I'm just having a little bit of a rough patch right now, but it seems like everything's starting to finesse. And I think that's it. I will be here doing my thing. Haunt on. First, I'll start with a quote, and this is from Viktor Frankl. "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms. To choose one's attitude in any set of circumstances, to choose one's way." And that's a quote I hold dear, and coincidentally, it appears in Anthony Tyler's manuscript of Dive Manual. Dive Manual uses the framing of deep sea exploring to compare theology, esotericism, psychedelia, psychology, and philosophy into a heavy tome, but a wham bam, thank you, ma'am, primer for those that have an itch, an inkling, and a need to begin their journey inward. I've come across many primers before, but Anthony seems to be of the time, tearing on that tight rope of skepticism, research, and phenomena. So slither hither, weirdos and witches, and welcome to Anthony Tyler on this Pragmagic Liminal Stream. Yay.
Thank you very much for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
It's been a while. I think we started talking. I looked at back, when our first correspondences, and that's just my year. Man, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, it's been a weird one for everybody. Yeah, yeah, I can relate. But yeah, I I've been keeping busy, and I figured we'd surely make it happen sooner or later, and here we are. So plenty to talk about, that's for sure.
I
And
mean, yeah,
thank you very much for reading the book. I appreciate that.
of course, yeah. It's I know the pay or the manuscript you sent me was 223 pages, which happens to be my birthday. Not to be a little woo about it, but I was like, all right,
Oh
you
yeah,
know,
that's right. You're February 23rd, right?
yeah,
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
22nd, so
Ha!
Pisces. Yeah,
There you go. That
no
makes
doubt.
sense.
Yeah,
I was going to
absolutely.
ask you too, because with all the symbolism, of water and Neptune and all of that, you know,
Oh yeah.
heavy symbolism within the book. I crossed it out. I put on the list of questions. Ask him if he's a Pisces, and I was like, no, that's lame. No one cares.
Yeah, it can it has its tropes, but astrology, as we'll probably bring up at least a little bit. It's definitely, it has at least some sort of value. Some people throw the baby out with the bathwater there.
Yeah, I think I have a fickle resolve when it comes to matters such as astrology. I would say more so about the popular consciousness of astrology and
Mm.
you know um terror, and all of that. It's more so I how do I put this? I get swayed the other way the more and more I see, it being used to certain degrees.
Mhm.
And I know that's no qualm against the actual study or the praxis. It's more of a qualm against how it's being used, right?
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah, and that's a I don't mean to be too like adversarial, but that's kind of a line that I draw in the sand a little bit against like new age and things, because there, and it's not a wholesale line in the sand. There are plenty of people who use that descriptive term new age for themselves, and they are very well intended, and they can be well informed, but it's, as I've said in the past, like there's just there's no control methods to new age. It's just kind of it's like choose your own narrative, and that can be good. There's an aspect to that I definitely champion, but there has to be some sort of yeah, control methods. And for me, that really all goes to um empiricism being the the beginning of the trail of breadcrumbs, not being the end.
Amen. Yeah.
Yeah, it's you can find all sorts of different metaphysical philosophical ideas that ring true in a variety of ways, but then there's the question of how you bring that back down to your practical life and what the practical implications of those things are. And that's those are quintessential pieces of like a real, what you would call, spiritual discipline, that are so often lost in new age. um
Yeah.
so and the book, in many ways, Dive Manual, it's definitely a primer. And it's almost it's that middle point between skeptic and um open-mindedness, because a good part of any researcher that's really trying to get to the bottom of something wants to look into the opposing viewpoint of things.
Of
So,
course. Yeah.
yeah. So, and but also there were certain things like, so that's where, the healthy skepticism and empiricism comes in. But then there were other things that I wanted to tackle, like things that I have used before and I will whenever I, feel the whenever I desire to. But like, for instance, I haven't owned a tarot deck in a while.
Hmm.
And but I've tinkered with it before. And as I've done research into it. But and a lot of the reason that I wanted to tinker with it and do research into it is because I the best way to put it, just looking into the standardized bullet points of what someone would consider Western like esotericism today, and
Yeah.
see, where what to sift through, because there's a difference between, as I'm sure you're well aware, dogma and tradition. And I
Hmm.
really wanted, that's a big part of it, using the empiricism and Occam's razor to separate the value of tradition from the superstitions of dogma and things like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, obviously I'm a bit more, well, I live in that, contradictory, medium of it too. I can, it really depends. And people don't want to hear how fluid that medium is. I think what sells tickets is
Absolutely.
certainty, right?
Right, right,
and
yeah.
and like the agnosticism of all this stuff, it gets wishy-washy and you sound like a flagpole sitter, like, or a
Yeah.
fence sitter, I should say. And yeah, and it just gets maddening, thinking about the I don't know, like the vitriol that either, empiricists, because you can be an empiricist in either aspect, right? There's extremes of either, um source of ingenuity when it comes to, feeling this woo or whatever you call it, or investigating this woo, whether it's, you're absolutely against it and have made the decision that, this is matters of the material and not the ethereal, right?
Mhm.
So, and it goes either way, and that's something that I've been meditating on a lot about recently, because which is funny too, because reading your book, it kind of reinvigorated parts of it for me, because I go through washes myself. I'm a bipolar believer. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel you, I
And
feel you.
like it goes, I'm still trying to construct ideas and research about my own phenomena that I've experienced, but
Mhm.
also, I'm pretty forthright in saying that doubt is a good thing,
Yeah.
to have. And I come from the Church of Doubt, or like the idea that Robert Anton Wilson, that supreme agnosticism, you
Mhm.
know. But at the same time, you build pillars of things that have helped you throughout your life, and that these pillars hold up, this cathedral of belief in any personality, in any person. So when you're continuously smashing them down and building them back up, it's hard to, kind of move forward. And what I wanted to ask you about this book, I think you mentioned it a little bit about, finding yourself within the search when the individuation becomes too intense, right? Jung mentioned something about that, where he said it can be bad for you to be too extreme with it.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Well, a bit of that's definitely a warning that Jung gives, and because it's just a classical, it can be summarized as don't bite off more than you can chew, and you can break down a lot of um, the more allegorical or psychological components from there. And I mean, it really all goes down to, there's four major components to the psyche from the Jungian standpoint. I mean, and therefore by proxy being found in any given metaphysical discipline, because that's what Jung was trying to do, as I'm sure most of your listeners are aware of. It's a lot of this, not generalizations, but finding the Occam's razor, the resolute commonalities. So, um, with the whole Jungian sentiment, there is the four components. There's the divine father, there's the divine mother, the logos or the persona, and
Mhm.
then the shadow. And the shadow is what individuation largely deals with. And it all gets Jung was very alchemical, and I'm very hermetically influenced. I have a deep
Right.
appreciation for alchemy.
Yeah.
And it really boils down to doing that, uh, getting your hands dirty, with the shadow work, as people like to say, so that you can draw deeper, more resolute paths of communication within your own psyche, and uh, get closer to that proverbial sacred alchemical marriage of opposites in your psyche.
Sure. Yeah, but I guess parsed or lamented two extremes of that. I've definitely had times in my life where shadow work just enveloped me. It was, you know what I mean? It was a bit harmful, I
Hmm.
think, in
Hmm.
the construct of, you know, fixing the self, quote unquote. I hate that word for it, but um and I think especially too when it comes to, mental diagnoses and, communing with brain chemistry as the other, there's just it's got to be tempered so much. I just really
Hmm.
don't think, I that's why I like Dive Manual, because it gives a step by step of, the preparation. Say if you were a diver, like what you would need to get ready to do this, and it's a good framing in the book for it.
I appreciate
Um,
it.
yeah, because like jumping right in, to the deep blue sea without, you know, prep, you're gonna get the bends, forever.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
absolutely. And I think that's to just to like articulate the shadow and some of the dangers. It doesn't have to be dangerous, but it certainly can be. The classic opposite ends of the shadow, because that entails all that which you are not readily processing consciously, but
right.
it's going through your psyche, and therefore likely that the stream that connects to the reservoir of the collective consciousness, so to speak. And
Yeah. The neither
so
neither.
right. So with the shadow, the two opposite, the two different sides of the coin, best examples being Mephistopheles, in the Gautier's classic rendition of Faust, and then Virgil, the Roman poet that guides Dante through hell and purgatory and hands him off in heaven. So and those are interesting because Virgil, the good guy, but the implication there being that he's not quote unquote divine. He's not in heaven. But and then Mephistopheles is a demon throughout the story arc, but important to remember that the context is key, and the framework at the beginning is Mephistopheles as this like doubting but respectful angel in the court of heaven. And
Sure.
then this sort of Book of Job echo, like reminiscent thing, unfolds, and that's how. And in many ways, the story of Faust is like the opposite of the Book of Job. And
Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it's shadow work very interesting. I think um, there's a lot to be said about it, and I think that's why Lovecraft as well is so endearing, because it really articulates in that more literary artistic with that literary artistic license. It really articulates how your fears can attract greater things, and um,
Yeah. This
it's
without
important.
the anchor of humanity,
And it's
you know.
important to, it's physics of the psyche. You got to take it step by step, like you would build a house, or go set sail and go on a dive trip.
Right. Or build
So
a cathedral in the mind, right? With pillars. Yeah.
absolutely, yeah, yeah, 100%. And so, yeah, the real danger is just in the allegory itself, like what's the point of building a house if you're not going to do it step by step, and then what's the point of going out to sea to dive if you're just going to drown out there?
Yeah. So I'm just telling somebody it's on YouTube,
Cool.
for Michelle.
I really like the Freemasonic allegory. It gets into conspiracy theory and things, but I think sometimes people forget that uh, there are we could talk about upper echelons and their socialite clubs,
So
but
what I
generally
wanted,
yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
what I think, was so revealing to me about, the allegory, of Dante's Inferno that you were using, but you do this comparative folklore, mythology, theology thing throughout, the book, where you are comparing the Sephiroth, with planets, and you're comparing, the different, I love it too. It's in that Campbellian way of, you're bridging, you're just bridging so many different aspects, and especially, going through almost like a folkloric stance too, because bringing in Dante's Inferno, I would say, was it was left field for me, because I err on folklore, being sort of um a heavy syrup of, you know theology, philosophy, all of that, but I rarely see it being used in that way. So I thought that was really cool. What inspired that?
I think just over time, trying to parse through the commonalities I saw without generalizing things, like common denominators and fractions.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and over time, the trees of life and death were the first big light bulbs for me, and because the tree of life, I think it helps you understand the tree of life a lot more, that Kabbalistic model, when you get the juxtaposition of the tree of death. And the tree of death is something that I was a little surprised. You could definitely find material on it out there now, and it slowly trickles out more and more, but it's not a really widely covered topic. And I think it's very interesting and useful, because it really is, it's kind of like yin and yang on hallucinogens.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
uh, and that's where, after mulling over that for long enough, and just kind of looking through different things, I really, and being interested in the divine feminine component of the Divine Comedy and Dante's travels, it really just kind of dawned on me that, and then, I'm not, I don't think I'm by any means the only one to
For
um,
sure.
draw the
Yeah.
correlates, but I don't think it's been very explored very much at all.
No. Yeah.
And I think it's really worth mulling over, because the more I almost like looking into it, I almost expected right off the bat, the way back when, trying to draw the correlates between the trees and the map of heaven and hell, and almost expecting it to not line up and just being wishful thinking, but it was like all lined up very well. And of course, it only makes sense because so much of the other symbolism lines up as well. You can tell that, at least in some sense, Dante was definitely very well studied, and he was aware of other predecessor traditions and things. So yeah.
So you mentioned, more of a, would you consider yourself more of a hermeticist, or just that's just a label, or is that something that you feel comfortable with calling
Mm,
yourself?
there's a handful of traditions that I hold close to my heart,
Okay.
but I find it hard to fully jump in the boat of one,
Yeah.
because also there is, um, I take into account influences and things. There's certain overlap,
Yeah.
in more
Anarchic.
cases than other, yeah, in more cases than others sometimes, but always in some ways. And so, I was raised Christian, so I appreciate the esoteric qualities of that. But I just couldn't call myself a Christian, because of all the baggage and the limitations of it, of
Hmm.
course. And so Hermeticism, a lot of Christians forget that, historically speaking, there were a lot of prominent, uh, you know, church philosophers and things that considered Hermes like a pre-Christian prophet.
Right.
So there's a lot of carryover there, and then I appreciate Gnosticism a lot, and my great grandpa was a 32nd degree Freemason of the Scottish Rite. So, and Masonry, some of the respectable parts of it are a lot of it being steeped in that sort of metaphysical, Gnostic sort of tradition in many
Yeah.
ways. And but I also really love Buddhism and Taoism. So, I like, and I really see the correlates between all those. They kind of work synonymous synonymously in my brain in many ways, even though they serve different components, certainly. But and a lot of that kind of like bottom line is um it could be boiled down to a lot of chaos magic, because I'm very
Sure.
interested in the mechanics of belief at large.
Yeah, I try even now to um separate myself from the title of chaos magic, as like I say the punks did when it became kind of three chords and spikes, you know what I mean?
Right,
But
right.
it's an all-encompassing thing, and it's hard to argue, anarchic magic not being chaos magic, especially if you're being reverent to the tools that you're using. You're not just kind of freely, grabbing this and that, just and not respecting the culture and the pathos with the history that comes with the different things. So I get that for sure. Yeah, it's funny how I don't know. There's something so uber modern. I often think that when I was younger, I didn't think I was made for these times. And then, when I started working within magic and theology and different, practices, I was like, oh, thank God I'm in this time. This
Yeah, right, right. I know how you
or
feel.
goddess, I should say. Yeah.
Yeah, amen.
Oh, I asked about the Hermeticism thing too, because I felt like it was an overall oeuvre from the book. I know you talk about it in the book too,
It
but
definitely strongly hermetically influenced, without a
yeah,
doubt.
yeah, and I always enjoy that. Uh, I have a deep appreciation for the corpus and all of that stuff, But I wanted to ask if that was like what pulled you in, because I'm nonlinear, as you can tell, and we're going to go back a little early to what prompted Dive Manual, what your journey was like, and specifically I wanted to ask you about the was it Beaujolais
Yeah,
Lodge of
yep.
the Blue Moose? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, those are fond memories there. So, yeah, what prompted it is, well, I think like how a lot of people's interest in this stuff starts. It's always usually always from an early age. Like I remember I have a really vivid memory of being in like second grade or something and going to the elementary school library and just happenstantially coming across um like beginner books, like a little older than my demographic, but for like fourth, fifth grade or something like that, talking about Loch Ness monster and UFOs and
Oh yeah.
mysticism and things. And goddess bless the person crazy enough to make beginners children's books about those things, because
Oh my
it is
God, the
awesome.
Scholastic book
Yeah.
fair. Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
every scary stories to tell in the dark, every UFO little book.
Totally.
And yeah, I actually
And
got caught stealing those books, by the way, when I was a kid. So
that's
sorry
a
to
worse thing
interrupt.
to steal. No, no sweat. Um, so, but as I got older, I was always interested in philosophy, and then um, I ended up was my dad is actually a detective, and so
No.
being that,
Nice.
there's their old that's there's bless excuse me, that there's that old saying about um how polarizing preachers children and cops children can be.
Mm.
And yeah, so I was kind of like that rebellious, like, quote unquote, free spirit. And so he ended up sending me to military school for 6 months, where I ended up graduating high school a little early. And
Oh.
yeah, that was actually, and some might say it's my Piscean nature,
Mhm.
because of the regimentedness and the overt military nature of it. It really actually forced me, which I'm very thankful for, to go very deep inward. And I was able to, read as much as I wanted in my free time. So I read a lot, and I had a mentor there who's someone still very near and dear to my heart. Like one of the definitely the closest mentor I ever had. In terms of like development and things, aside from like my own father and family. And he goes, he's been given the nickname. It's not his nickname he came up with himself, but it's stuck for a long time. Bald Monk. He's a very interesting guy. He's like this old school dude from Brooklyn at the dawn of hip hop, and the a black dude that became a cop, and he's retired now, and he's very much into Taoism, and he's like a kung fu sensei, and he was my mentor in military school, and he would give me a book a week. He got to see me an hour a week, and he gave me Taoism and a lot of Eastern metaphysics and things. And then after
Mm.
that, um, it really getting out of military school to the horses were off to the races, and then other things started happening, like some unexplainable things. I definitely have a handful of like weird left field stories throughout my life, that have just further enveloped me in these things, some of which being dreams, and even some UFO sightings in Alaska. And there was one period in time I was like 19, before the refugee crisis in America and the flooding coming in. I made good friends with an Iraqi refugee, and that was fascinating. I got to know him really well for a few months. So there's a lot of exposure to like opposing viewpoints and a lot of different concepts like early on. And I've
Yeah.
always been in it, man. Here
No,
I
I'm
am.
similar, very similar too. I wanted to ask, um, because Dive Manual, I feel it's very like academic in the way that it's laid out. I've worked as, a journalist for many years and stuff. I can read when somebody's had, like the proper academic layout.
Yeah,
you
I
know.
appreciate it. I try.
So like, where did you go to school? Somewhere like what was that like?
Um, I've dabbled in college, and I
That's what
plan
I
on.
yeah. I
Yeah,
dabbled. Yeah.
yeah, I think I may go back for a communications degree at some point, like at least an associate's or something. But really, I got lucky in a sense. There's a website that some may that might ring a bell for some people. I'm not affiliated with it anymore, but it was where I cut my teeth. And it was journalism, independent, nonpartisan journalism at the Last American Vagabond, and
Nice.
yeah, that still floats around quite a bit. And um, I don't know what all Ryan, the editor, talks about these days completely, but I know Ryan personally. I haven't talked to him in a little while, but I could say that he's a very studious individual, and he kind of took me under his wing for a little bit when I was like 19, 18. I started dabbling in the Vagabond, and he would I would post articles there, and we had a good that was also like a bit of a writing journalistic mentorship for me because he had more experience, a lot more. He's a grown ass man. I'm
Hmm.
25 now.
Right.
And he we had a good working rapport where he would send something back and say like maybe work on this and this, and then I would really work on it, and that was a good thing for me. And that website, it's taken off even more now, but we even received some traction there while I was there. And that but so that was also politics, but they really
Right.
encouraged me to get into metaphysics and philosophy and things. And then eventually, as that website got further and further into politics, it was time to amicably part ways as my brain started to fill with enough material where
Sure.
I had to write a book. So,
I got to tell you, the parallels between us are, intense in that, if you look at the bullet points of our lives, it's obviously not the military school, even though I have family that is military, but yeah, cutting your teeth at mine was disinfo.com
oh,
and
okay, okay,
esotericana,
awesome.
years ago, a few years ago, I guess now years ago. Jesus.
It's crazy how time
How old are
flies.
we?
I
Yeah.
know. Good Lord.
But yeah, it's interesting too because I, you, what I loved about Dive Manual, and I'll say this all the time, that's like the most lazy way to introduce a new topic. What I loved about it's like there's a lot of things I loved about it. But one was the framing of it was very romantic in a way, and you have this continuous story about kind of like interpersonal conflict within yourself about a relationship that you had with somebody.
Yeah.
And that was why I was joking, I was like, okay, well, the romantic in me sees that and is like, I get you, I hear you, and that's why I was joking earlier about like, is this guy a Pisces?
Ah, yes, yes, 100%. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, um, that is truly, everything described thus far was really all the building blocks, and then this experience, this relationship was the major tipping point. Was
I'm
everything
telling you,
started rolling down the
through
hill.
they always say through desperation, through duress, whatever, people find these things, and that could be a salvo for most. It can be a deepening gyre for a lot of others. But yeah, like interpersonal relationships that I've had throughout the years have definitely been benchmarks about, how deep I'm getting into myself,
Hmm.
let alone like how one interacts with the rest of the world, right? And like interpersonally through, common connections. And yeah, so it really resonated with me, you being pretty like blunt in the book about, parts of you were jealous, about certain things happening. And you had a very sound, I don't know if I guess my question is, at that time did you run through these list of questions, or did you have to learn those and went back and studied how you reacted?
Um, it was very much a trial and error, figure out as I go. There was a
Yeah.
bit of a hurriedness to it, and um, I think that's why the among other reasons I wanted to go with some sort of adventurous motif, like setting sail and diving, because
Right,
it's
because you use both, yeah, I think pretty fluidly,
yeah,
yeah.
and because it's something that um like, even if you prepare for those sorts of adventures, one thing you kind of have to prepare for, paradoxically, as much as you can, is what you can't prepare for. You just got to keep that
Yeah.
sliver of yourself ready for the unexpected type thing. And um, yeah, I go into it in dive manual, and that tipping point was really a dream I had of this woman, some months before I met her, and it's without going into semantics, it's essentially impossible for me to have ever even like heard her name before.
Yeah.
And the more often I've talked to people about that, 'cause I can't control that. I'm not saying I can uh willfully have dreams of the future or anything, but it seems to be a fairly common thing. Like degrees of separation, you more than likely know some person that's had some weird, like, pre deja vu type thing in a dream.
Sure.
Yeah, it is so. Um, uh, not only was that an initial interest for me, the whole, like, how is that dream possible? Because I met her in a way that was very reminiscent of the dream. In fact, archetypally, it was the exact same thing. It was just the dream was a little more like illustrious and cartoonish.
Sure.
And um, but it was also the shadow work involved, because there's that old saying that is pretty reminiscent of this whole Jungian projection process, and relationships you have with people. And it's like, you're a generalized combination of the three closest people in your life at any given time. And there's some truth to that, in the sense of, the reason we're drawn to people is it has innate archetypal, it's chaos theory. Like,
Sure.
how far might those things ripple, and the deeper you investigate those ripples, and especially if you're having phenomena, like in my case, even after breaking up with this person, and even when I felt like emotionally I had moved on, I still continued to have the same dreams that I had when I first met her. And it's this weird, um, existentially frustrating, um, chase motif where
Mhm.
she's motioning for me to follow her, and there's always so many obstacles in the way. and I can't, whether they be like mythological or I'm floating through space or running through a maze, or and I can never catch up with her. And it really, through a lot of that shadow work, mm, how do I summarize this quickly, in ways that we can expand on? Like, there are some aspects of shadow work that you could consider demonology, but there's also those like wounded aspects of yourself that need nurturing. And what I was realizing was this was some sort of existentially frustrating, deep projection of my relationship to the anima. And it wasn't
Mhm.
a sort of negative thing. It was the what was negative was my broken relationship to this aspect, this deep archetypal aspect of my psyche, to all of our psyches. Um, and yeah, I don't know. There's more I could get into from there, but I would be happy to volley it over to you for a second as well.
No, yeah, I just reminds me. I jotted down a quote I think that works about it, especially in these times of interpersonal and human duress. People go hunting for this, right? Or diving in this case, maybe hunting in the next case. But
Yeah.
people, it's that you say that people often fail to find much value in the spiritual because they are afraid of the plunge. And even if they do the plunge, they don't know how deep to go or how deep they can go, or if they will ever remember the way home. Many people give up halfway through the journey because they don't understand that it can sometimes take 20,000 leagues before we dive deep to find anything monolithic, you know? And I
Nice.
and that's,
Thank you.
that's kind of part and parcel to what we were talking about in the beginning about the empiricism of things. I see too often people in duress and people through desperation turn to different metaphysics and practices and hell even religions, um to help seek the other, right? To get them out of the situation they're in. And they find that it's not the answer that they were looking for, or it's not, what they want is a quick fix. That what they want is, an exit plan, right? Like a quick
Hmm.
escape. And they tend to bail on it and then go around and say, oh, it's all bullshit. And I see this often with a lot of people that it didn't work for me, it must not be true. It didn't work for me, it must all be bullshit.
Hmm.
When, the sad, I won't say sad, but it's a somber, like, it's the somber nature of putting yourself out of your comfortable element, putting yourself out of the context of which you were in, being truly adventurous, right? Going left all the way instead of whatever's right, and finishing it out
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
looking for, and then finding that meaning. Obviously, some people in their desperation, they go to sign up for a certain newsletter and realize, oh shit, do not like these people.
Yeah, yeah.
But you know,
Something that drove me throughout my experiences that became Dive Manual was the whole allegory of Saturn ascending.
right.
Yeah, and not even because of the literal astrological implications, although there could be some, and but like if nothing else, just the Saturnian symbolism and the whole idea of just in that shadow work sense of once you reach a certain point of age, the things that you actively avoided as best as you could are going to come back and kind of smack
Hmm.
you. And that it was really like for me, again, part of what propelled me throughout the research and writing experience, and I mean, even experiencing all that before getting into the writing was that idea that, like, well, in some sense, the proverbial genie is out of the bottle. And if I stuff this stuff back in, I'm just going to be kicking the can down the road. And
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, but then again, it of course goes back to, um, not wanting to bite off more than you can chew, lest things become a bit Lovecraftian if you're not careful. And that's one of that's a motif I tried to run with all throughout the book is uh, that even when things are going well, like when you're out on in the open adventure like that, um, again, there's that impending there's that potential impending doom, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, my father always said, expect the worst, be pleasantly surprised. And there's truth in that, but also, I'm like, Jesus, can I have a little joy in my childhood?
Right, yeah, I know the feeling. Yeah, my dad said pretty much the same thing.
Uh, but I wanted to say, and I love this, we're weaving circles, and like this is a cool spider web of a discussion because I found this other quote of yours that I wanted to talk about. We were talking about young, and maybe we were like to finish your point that you were just saying, about diving in too early, or not having the yeah, the measures, the means, to fathom like bits of the journey rather than trying to rush to the finish line, right?
Mhm.
You say that Young and his constituents have always warned against the path of a forceful or expedited individuation. We must all walk the middle path, never too naive as to ignore the shadow and its inclinations towards pain and ultimate triumph through self discovery. And at the same time, I lost it. At the same time, we must be even more careful to not look our demons straight in the eye. They are likely to turn us to stone with the callous indifference of a boy flicking an ant off his picnic basket. All the same, however, this does not mean that a confrontation with them should be avoided. And I think that's it. It's like, I'm not a gamer, but, if you think about, levels in a video game, you know what I mean? You're not going to get, the Jesus, I'm going to date myself with the Mortal Kombat reference. I was like, you're not going to get Shang Tsung in the second level. You know what I mean?
Hey man,
But
isn't there a new movie? I think that's coming back around.
okay, good. Yeah, yeah.
Not that I've seen
M
it.
Bison, you're not going to get M Bison in the second round. But and I enjoy that, and I think people forget that. I think this, especially in the intro when I mentioned how I think this book is of the time, is because it's a lot of like slow down. Like I know you want everything to happen right away, and I know this is probably going to be a treacherous thing, but it's about the process. It's not about
Right.
the result. So,
Absolutely. Which
yeah.
is something that even though I talk about metaphysics and chaos theory so much, which is basically chaos magic in a sense,
Sure. Yeah.
um, eh, that whole idea of the 1,000-mile journey starts with the first step and continues with all the steps in between is something that's kind of lost in um, if you're not careful in the hang up slash fascination that a chaos magicians have with results based
I
magic
know.
and things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where I delineate, from chaos magic is, yeah, to me, like the magic a lot of the times is the process is the ritual.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that is the result.
Absolutely. One thing I always love to bring up because I don't think it ever gets old. It's a pretty timeless saying. And I think while it is brought up, I'm surprised it's not brought up more in modern discussions of metaphysics. The whole idea of the butterfly effect, classic
Right.
chaos theory adage, from because everyone knows, the flap of the butterfly wing can potentially create the typhoon halfway around the world. But when you really
Mhm.
think about it, like, isn't that essentially what magic is? Because if you ever tried to do some sort of forensic analysis from that typhoon to the butterfly flap, even though we know that's theoretically possible, there's no way with our modern science or understanding, that you could ever make that resolute conclusion that, oh, it came from that butterfly flap. Oh, I see. So
Yeah.
magic
And I
basically,
like that
event horizon.
idea,
Oh, go ahead.
that idea too, especially because, the flap of a butterfly wing isn't the pomp and circumstance of flapping a butterfly wing to do something. It's just the causality
Hmm.
of an insect, a bug doing what it does. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So there's these like crazy connotations that, us just, being humans and making short decisions and instinctual things or anything, and it
Right.
could have these major effects around the world.
The
And I think
magic of
that's
the present moment.
yeah, and that's and that's a scary thing too, because I think, when we're talking about, and I use this term a lot. I know some people are gonna, you know, guffaw at this, but self sorcery, and I mean that. It sounds goofy and it sounds D&D, um, but it's a true thing, like learning how to commune with your instincts, like, and
Mhm.
that's why I started this whole quote with that Viktor Frankl quote, or I started this whole podcast with that Viktor Frankl quote, because if you can, commune with your instinctual reactions to life happening at you, that to me is that's true sorcery, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
100%.
And
Um,
let's oh, go
Go ahead.
ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say that I mean self sorcery is a great term for it. I hadn't heard that yet. I like it. But yeah, I mean the alchemy process throughout the book is, yeah, I mean just, yeah, self sorcery through and through. Absolutely.
Yeah, and like, yeah, the transmutation. I do like
Hmm.
that there is a spine in Dive Manual that is alchemical. And and to your credit, I must say, because Lord, have I read many magic primers, in the last like 4 or 5 years. And I'm not saying yours is a magic primer, but I've read a lot of, I think maybe haphazardly written tomes to kind of elevate the writer, right?
Right.
And them
Yeah.
being somebody that should be revered or whatever for their knowledge. But
Mhm.
yours, I think you're marrying the dive metaphor with the actual real story of your like inner turmoil in a relationship here and there. I thought that was like beautifully constructed and real. And yeah,
Thank you.
I
Yeah.
enjoyed that a lot.
Well, that's excuse me. That's a huge point that I like to bring up whenever I can, and something that I really wanted to highlight with Dive Manual. And ultimately, one of the biggest reasons I felt compelled to put any bit of my own story in there is that's something that's so lost in esotericism or occultism, just mystical thinking at large. Is not always, but too often. It's we have this many times the experience starts out as seeking power in that Faustian sense, and it's not really what it's about in the long run. It's okay to um be opportunist in a way that still keeps altruism in mind. We all have to live in a world and take care of ourselves and the people we care about, but um the idea in really using any sort of metaphysical discipline, spiritual discipline, um, is therapy. It's catharsis in the long run. It's healing your sick soul, and that's all too often. Again, what's left out is, and that to me is such a telltale sign of someone that didn't get enough of the full picture. Because I don't have the full picture, no one does, but that's how you can tell
Yeah.
that they have too little of a picture, is when their biggest takeaway is how interesting they are.
Yeah, right. Yeah, like, and also just the certainty too. I feel,
Mhm.
and this may be just a testament of the times, but I think people are more resolute to listen to, someone with an authoritative stance instead of someone going, I don't fucking know, man. This shit is crazy. I do this, I do that. Like my mind changes, every now and again. Some weeks I think it's demons, other weeks I think it's my brain, like
Right. And yeah, and so much of it in the long run, I really think it comes down to that chaos magical idea of there's a certain inertia behind certain symbols, especially given your own personal context. But, so boiled down to, there are certain environmental factors, but ultimately do what works for you, like
yeah.
truly. As long as there's some underlying emphasis of altruism in a way that is, because there are times when you have to sacrifice certain things, but generally speaking, there should be a two-way street. What helps you should help others, and vice versa, if possible. You know.
Yeah, altruism is underrated, I think.
Yeah,
It's
some people think it's impossible. I
yeah.
think just because it's an ideal doesn't mean
Well,
it's
and then again,
impossible.
here we are. It's people thinking about results, like the absolutism of altruism. No, the strive for altruism
Exactly.
is the point. Not, no one's
Yeah,
gonna be a resolute altruist.
exactly.
It's the strive for it. This is, I think that speaks more about our culture now. Everything is defined as some absolutist prism.
Mhm. Mhm.
When we use these terms, um, not understanding that just because you can't be a spaceman, doesn't mean that you shouldn't learn about space,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or
Um
that it's fake. I'm just kidding.
um something that really spurred me along in my interest of uh different belief systems and spiritual disciplines being like tools of a tool belt, was some like advice, like just words of wisdom that I once got. And that being, if you think about it from like an evolutionary adaptational perspective, and especially before the advents of like the internet and even industrialism in many cases, when things were a bit more, when cultures were even more distant from each other, and less communication, there would obviously be different um, evolutionary adaptational pressures for someone in the Arctic Circle than there would be someone in the Caribbean. And I think that dogma certainly would not agree with that. Any Christian you ask would say like, well, Christ is universal across the globe. But I really think
Yeah.
that it's I think it is
Which is a funny sentence. Universal across the globe.
it
That's
is,
that's
right? Yeah.
exactly how they think. Yeah. Or not they, you know what I mean? Like the dogmatic folks. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. But I think this is one thing, um, that I always will debate endlessly with my Christian family, that I get along with plenty well. But is just, I will always, it makes perfect sense having, 'cause when you look into different religions and spiritual traditions, as I'm sure you and the vast majority of your audience, if not all of them, know, the context is key. You have to, like,
Yeah.
it's anthropology becomes so crucial, and that wouldn't be the case if it wasn't like they were filling some sort of existential heuristic gap. Heuristic being a fun thing to bring up at this point
Yeah,
because
do it. I have it listed.
awesome. Yeah, I think that that's a big piece because I'm interested, obviously, in archetypes, and I talk about memetics a little bit as well, and the units of psychological steps and unfoldment and things and processes, and heuristic, um, which can either be like a unit or like a descriptive term, is this trial and error self-education process that we find all throughout our adaptation process. Like, two easy examples being, so much of like medieval medical, before that, and especially common in the medieval era, was the notion that you could pick up um, illnesses and sickness from smell. And you
Hmm.
can't, but unless it's like chemical warfare or something, but generally speaking you can't, but we do know that like rotting terrible smells are pretty reasonable, almost universal indicators of things you should probably stay away from and not eat. So there is some sort of what you would call heuristic value in there. You're not getting the full
Right.
truth, but you are getting legitimate tangible
Like
value.
how we make, the unaromatic gasoline smell like rotten eggs,
You're right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. Another example being, people still many to this day think that porcupines shoot out their quills.
Oh,
Yeah, I think they might have some sort of ability to like release it from themselves, but they definitely
right.
don't shoot. And
They're not shooting it. Yeah.
yeah, but if you think that they do, then you're probably likely to stay further away from them, and there will be some value in that for you. You'll err on the side of caution. So a lot of heuristics, like from the adaptational point of view, is um um is this like interesting amalgamation of like experimentation and erring on the side of caution. And you can really see how when you're, because like it is, there's many cases even in our modern life where you can see cause and effect. You can see an A to B step system there, but that doesn't mean that you know what happened in between.
Yeah.
There's so many examples of that, and
And that's
that's
what concerns me. I want to know what happened between there.
absolutely, yeah, yeah, and then that's pretty much uh in the scale of the human experience, that A to B is it, that's heuristic right there. And
Yeah.
Um, I think, I think that's another thing that's lost in something like New Age when you're trying to sell as many books as possible, is you want to sell people this concrete reality of metaphysical ideas. But that's a big point that I try to impress with my research is you, um, the part of this is your own individual discernment. It's your own individual
Sure.
experience, because there are going to be, like we said, some beliefs that you're probably that are better suited for you than others, more than likely. And that um you might actually get tangible practical value out of it that you can measure. And what that means is that there's some level of truth to it, but you probably won't ever know what the whole aspect of truth is to that. You might get shades of it, you might get tidbits or breadcrumbs, but and that's where people, that's the threshold of cultism right there.
Sure.
People get sold a bill of goods.
Exactly. The absolutists.
Right.
It kind of brings me back to this idea. Actually, you know what I'm thinking? Do you want to keep going? Do you have time?
Yeah, yeah, I got time.
You want to take like I'll do a little music break and you can use the restroom. We'll get going
Sure.
again.
Yeah, like 2 minute or something.
2-3 minute. Yeah.
Cool.
Tops.
Right on.
Awesome. And thanks everyone in chat for letting me know about volume. We will be back. Having a great chat with Anthony Tyler here. Mods, I will send you a Amazon. Is Amazon the best way to get Dive Manual?
Yeah, you could go right to Amazon, type it in, or you can go to my website, divemind.net, where you can find a
Okay.
link pretty easy.
I'll put that in there.
Cool.
And yeah, I'll play a track from my recent Dakota Slim record, and we'll use the bathroom and take a little break. And we'll be right back. a flighty fishy soothsaying shaman. Beware the creeping tongue that say that they own it. Beware the creeping tongue that say they are legion. They are legion. I like that. I was like, "Hey, you want to take a break?" I blamed it on you, but just really had to pee.
No worries, no worries. I enjoy a good intermission.
Just a slight intermission. I didn't time that music well to that small scene, but we're just gonna keep on going. No, so what I really wanted to dive into, that was not an intentional pun. Was how you begin the book with this thesis statement, and it goes, what I am arguing is that the soul categorically can be observed. It's just a matter of whether this too is deterministic or not. And then use an example, the atheists argue that it is, where the existentialists argue that it isn't. And so what have you found?
Well, I think that, you know, on the opposite side of the spectrum, there are people like Sam Harris, someone
Mm,
that you know, I've listened to a great deal of what he has to say over the years, more so in the past, and he, he says he has some good points. While I don't agree with a lot of his conclusions, certainly a smart, articulate person that has interesting food for thought. And ultimately, when it comes to free will, for example, one of his big topics, I think he is he's got to be aware of the term on some level, because I know he talks with people like the Weinstein
right.
brothers and Jordan Peterson, but he
The
really has
whole
never
gamut.
taken, yeah, he's really never taken into account this whole like heuristic model. Um,
Right. That's
I
why I say Sam Harris debate Sam Cedar. I'm just kidding. That was a bad joke. But sorry, go ahead.
um so yeah, because ultimately, like, the fact that free will plays a component in how we operate, um i- it really is like a predicate. The human experience is very much predicated on the idea of free will and the belief in it. And I think that, much like so much of this unexplainable these unexplainable topics, like the fact that it's recurring and that it plays a crucial component in what you could boil down to our whole scale, like adaptation scale, is really something that can't be dismissed. And I think it really boils down to, which in my mind has never, even with all the neuroscience, has never been able to really, um, all the skepticism has never been able to argue away the whole Kantian idea, the a
Mm,
priori structure of the psyche. I think at the very least, and to dissect that quote that you mentioned a little bit, that really is, I firmly, I think, without question, empirically, the fact that there is that a priori aspect of the psyche um, is just almost like common observation. But again,
hmm
it really is, and I think that is the soul. I think very clearly, anthropologically, even, that is what everyone has always called the soul. And it really is at that point just a matter of the next steps, the next natural steps of the question, like, what is the soul? Does it survive after death? Those are different questions that are very interesting. But, like, first and foremost, I just, even from like an empirical, uh, material point of view, I simply don't see how you could say that there is no soul. I think that what they're really saying when they say that is there's no afterlife or travel of the soul, but it's different. These are different topics.
Sure. I think too, we get into this kind of tried and true lexicon of convoluted terms, right? When you say
Right.
soul, there's just so much connotation to that. Have you found a better terminology to discuss such things?
Mm,
Or do
um,
you just err on the side of I want this to be more receptive when I say these words because it's just easier, right? Easier to kind of pertain what I'm talking about if I'm using the word soul.
it's a good point, or a good question, and a little bit of both, I guess you could say, because on some level we have to look for, like I said, the common denominators, and that means
Mhm.
taking into account what the value was that people got out of terms that a skeptic today might consider superstitious or things like that. But also, I think, I think really, even though this is more of like, again, like an allegorical heuristic truth
Mhm.
than perhaps absolutely resolute, but there are resolute aspects. But point being, um, this chaos theory allegory of how the unfoldment of the world around us is very much chaos theory as well as our own psyches. I think that um, that whole idea of the fractal, which is chaos theory, it as above, so below. I think that that really touches the that's the cornerstone of the soul argument, as far as I'm concerned. It's like, sometimes people forget that the whole tree of life model, uh, proposed by the ancient Kabbalists, was supposed to be the quote unquote anatomy of God, and that is supposed to be some sort of allegorical, forensic almost implication, as in they recognized the power and relevance and almost damn near limitless potential of the imagination and the physics of the psyche, and how you could say, at least allegorically, that there is a cosmos inside each and every one of our psyches, and and they felt like existentially, through their own experiences, they could validate that enough to their liking. And so if that's true, which they rolled with as being true, then and man, humans are a little cosmos, then wouldn't the cosmos be a quote unquote big person?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
And
macro,
a lot of
micro
the
of that.
exactly, a lot, so
Yeah.
much of the allegory is lost these days, but it's all right there out in the open if you just care to look.
Yeah, I wonder, like, if there were so just the kind of permeation of Dive Manual, because it definitely seems like someone's journal, right, of things they have discovered over a certain amount of time and placed in a way like, "Hey, I'd like to share this with you. I see all this comparative, kind of, metamorphosis between these different esoteric ideas."
Mhm,
Were there any things that you were kind of any revelations that you had in writing it, as far
mhm,
as like, when you're trying to compose a book, right, or compose something, there's always kind of this idea of a finality to it in a way, right? So
mhm.
how did you know when to this is good, like to cap the end and like your resolution of it?
That's a very good question, and um, well, in some sense, part of me coming to terms with how to resolve it and know when it was done was recognizing that on some level, what part of the purpose was to be a snapshot, in a sense, like similar to, you're a musician, you the like as to how an album is in many ways kind of like a snapshot of your life at the
Sure.
time. And
Yeah.
your ideas might expand and evolve, but um the best case scenario, what you do with what happens to your past work is it becomes a relevant, useful snapshot. Even if things have
Yeah, it's
evolved,
journalism, right? Art is
right,
journalism.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Just because things expand doesn't mean that the past has become irrelevant or invalidated.
Yeah.
So in some sense, when I'm 40 years old, I'm sure that I might look that my ideas, at least some of them, will inevitably evolve and expand a little bit. But I feel very confident, having taken enough time to put this out and put the due diligence into it, that um, it'll stand the test of time, so to speak. And again, it's because I wanted it to be that kind of snapshot. I wanted it to kind of like have that almost that subtle twinge of like coming of ageness to it,
Yeah.
but more so from like a reflective perspective. I wanted, because I'm 25, I'm a little bit at like a midpoint, and this book was pretty much wrapped up when I was like 23 or so. A lot of the
Okay.
writing, 21, 22, and then a lot of the editing up until it came out last year. So anyway, I wanted it to be a little relatable for anyone who's a little younger than me if they were taking a dive so deep into subject matter. But a lot of it I knew, because of the subject matter, plenty of people older than me would be reading it. And the last thing I wanted to do was be like a young gun saying like I've learned so much more than all of you.
Right.
So it was more like I wanted to at best draw people into that reminiscent state and reflect on that almost like inner child in themselves in a way.
Well, and that's kind of what spoke to me about it reading it was, and I use that adage about, I read a lot of people's like, "Hey, I think I know what's up. I'm going to write a book about it, blah." What
I
I
can't
like about
stand that.
yours is that it's like it encapsulates, perfectly kind of the majesty of like the innocence of discovering these things, right?
Thanks.
It's like you're not gonna, yeah, in no way or shape or form did I read it and go, wow, this, he's too big for his britches. You know what I mean? Like,
I appreciate it.
like
Yeah. Those
it's cool. And that's what makes it so, I feel like it's a perfect snapshot too of just the time in which it is written and where, in this internet age and this, cross pollination, huge spider web of, the internet and cultures and everything, like you were able to kind of fine line, you know, in text, what the comparative ideas, really held to.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you. And
yeah,
that is it's not like any virtue signaling when I say that. It truly that is like it harkens back to what I said about spirituality as catharsis and healing the sick soul. There's where the thresholds of like real catharsis so many times have a sense of grace and humility to them. Humility, not necessarily as hopefully people understand. It's not like a humiliating way necessarily, although
sure.
that can be a
It's a
component.
humbling. Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's a big part of my life and a lot of my research in general, especially looking more into demonology with this next project. The idea that being so self-righteous and being like proverbially blinded by the light and thinking that you're so like so untouchably good, that's the threshold of pure evil so many times.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I've seen you too in other chats or in other podcasts, mainly kind of focused on the charlatanism of this stuff, right? So like you're very versed in, the that church of doubt when it comes to, wow, this is, these are people monetarily, subter whatever fuging. I don't even think that's a word, but like, like being clandestine with their true motives, and like it seems to be a, cult of personality. Shit, sometimes it seems to be a cult,
Hmm.
and it's interesting too because I have to say, and it's funny, I'm reading some of the chat, and all of my chats like, oh my god, to be 25 again, you know. But what's funny is that, we I think we discredit too. I think there's a big stigma, and I always hated this, especially the occult communities, that, you know, there's a huge stigma about age, and there's about like what you're putting out. And I will say, for any of those that have that stigma in the chat, like this book is not going to spoil your cornflakes about being old. It's just a great primer, and it reminds you of the comparative, folklore, I should say, because that's, I think, like the base standard of what all theology is, right?
Hmm.
The comparative
Absolutely.
folklore of like the inward search. So don't tell them to get off your lawn or anything. But
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Thanks. And I don't know, just candid food for thought. Growing up, my dad, um, I'm a little bit of the black sheep. I think is pretty more than fair to
Mm,
say, because like I come from a line of military people, and my dad being a detective, and over the years, they like I remember I don't in different conversations and tidbits, basically having to impress upon my dad that there and other family members even that there's a difference between like um really theatrical, verbose new age and like full-blown cultism and something like a disciplined philosophy and this archetypal analysis and trying to go about this stuff with control methods as best you
yeah.
can. And yeah, so having to just for the sake of and I would never really felt ostracized or anything, but it was so left field that I had to explain it certainly to over time to the people in my family, and that really did just kind of I think naturally um develop some of my mindset is in terms of distinguishing myself a lot more from some of the snake oil salesmen and such out there. And like I said, having a mentor that was this like old school hip hop head, retired cop who was into martial arts and Taoism. Um, it's always a running theme throughout my upbringing, this sort of disciplined humility, art of war approach. You want to keep a certain amount of humility and grace, but you want to be able to defend
Right.
yourself and stand
You
up
don't
for
want
what
to
you
be a
believe in.
pushover.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's funny too, I guess I'm trying to phrase this in a way, but yeah, I just think like the humility is such a big part that is missing a lot from, all of these texts and these people. I mean, right away if someone is has like the constant paranoia of self that is in us all, right? Like,
Hmm.
and it doesn't matter. Yeah, it's just, and I know I don't want to use words like narcissism and gaslighting that seems like everyone uses these days and don't
For
really know
real.
what they are.
For real.
Um,
Yeah.
but that's their way of saying, oh, someone, overconfident or egoic is, you know, and I think it's more of a projection too in a lot of times, but we can go through this whole thing. But I wanted to bring up, I don't know if I probably should ask you off air if you're okay to talk about this, but you put it in the book, so free game.
I'm sure it'll be
Uh,
fine.
but you talk a little bit about kind of succumbing to drugs and alcohol. Oh, I'll just put like, weed and alcohol or pills or I
Yeah. I
forgot what
mean,
it was.
especially at certain times in my life, there was more than just weed. Yeah.
And I think with us, because I too, I'm a recovering addict. I've been, very upfront about that. That's part of my humility, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but you had it in a time that also helped propel like you inward more, right? And I think
Hmm.
that's what I think as addicts, we're forced to do that all the time, or that's what we're escaping, right?
Right. Right.
So,
Absolutely.
and you
Um,
had there was another quote. I know I'm going to keep quoting you.
Feel free.
But says the addict deciding to get clean and then staying clean despite all odds, even in spite of relapses. This is the nature that constitutes the soul. The mere fact that a person can make a drastic change and stick with it despite every deterministic quality within them. This is the quality of a soul. And that's saying to me. And to move back on, the thesis kind of this book in a way is, the communion with that soul or that self,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
um
what Jung would call the circumambulation of the self, how we all
right.
orbit around this core a priori aspect of self-discovery throughout our lives, the same way that we orbit the sun. Um, and um, yeah, I can't remember. There are some things we could go to from there. I can't remember what I was particularly going to say to that effect, but the self discovery, absolutely,
Yeah.
quintessential, and um,
Well, I think also, finding ourselves, you know, through not escaping, right? Because I
right.
think to
Oh yeah, the
me,
addiction. There was some yeah
yeah,
good
yeah.
stuff I was going to bring up there. Well,
To me,
finish what
that
you're
that was
saying.
the escape. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Now, and that was something that was a huge part of the empirical leaning for me, especially early on, is anyone who's familiar with some of the forefront of addiction, like studies and legitimate sciences, Gabor Mate.
Sure.
Yeah, I really that was someone who was inspiring to me early on in a similar way that people like Jung and John Keel and Manly P. Hall were, and the allegory that he uses of the hungry ghost is something that always really stuck with me as well. And
Holy shit, I've been using that for years.
yeah,
Yeah, the
it's
tiny
so
neck, big
eloquent.
bellies. Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah,
the
it really
preta,
is.
as
Hmm.
they say.
Hmm.
Yeah,
It really is that. I think it's an eloquent allegory for um it might not be just an allegory, heuristic, mind you, but it's an eloquent allegory for that inertia that you have um with the monkey on your back of addiction. Like, even once you break that chemical dependency, there's still that psychological inertia, that just that pull, and then you have to work with that too. And so for me, I started out early on, having dealing with depression and anxiety in high school. I got on SSRIs and benzodiazepines, and then, just to disclaimer, I never had a psychotic diagnosis, but this is fairly common, to boost both of those prescriptions. They also gave me a mood stabilizer, like quote unquote
yeah.
antipsychotic. So
Hey, listen, I've been prescribed a lot of them. All right,
yeah,
this is
yeah.
this is a safe room of psychotics.
Cool. Um, and I was young. I took those from like 15 to 17, and it really gave me a really dissonant, like, haze, just like a fog. I felt very untuned with the world around me,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
that kind of attributed to and snowballed into what was essentially like a state of chronic depersonalization for a while. Like a really just a denial of the self, in a way where, like, I knew I existed in things, but it was like um just like black pilling really hard, in a way,
Yeah.
in the sense of just like none of this, like, like nihilism, like self
Yeah.
nihilism,
Straight. Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so, where I was never doing anything malicious to anybody else, but I really just um and thankfully I was raised with a sense of moral and ethics that I didn't feel the need to get rid of. But if not for that, I probably would have been a probably a terrible person. But instead, it was a lot more just self-destructive. And then there's
Sure.
and because of
And hey,
um
some of us, that were raised with moral and ethics, did terrible things. You know what I mean?
and
That's the disease, right?
absolutely, and no shame in
Yeah.
that. I can say that there's plenty of things, like anybody, that I wish I could take back. And the only thing that saved me was friends and family, because even at a time where I wasn't talking to family, I had good enough friends who, and in some sense, I really like that phrase, because it's kind of chaos theory reminiscent. There, but for the grace of God, go I.
Sure. Yeah.
Because if it wasn't for the people I just kind of like was lucky enough to be like attracted to friend wise, those because the people in you brought it up earlier, the quote unquote Beaujolais Lodge of the Blue Moose.
Right.
It was just this weird esoteric psychedelic goonie thing happening in my basement, and
Mhm.
we'd go out to my woods, tripping. This is from like 18, 19, 20, and then by 21 it was pretty much wrapped up. But intermittently, and we would have a lot of philosophical discussions and things, and it was I feel like if I hadn't taken that step of thank God and goddess that the drug use became psychedelic and went inward far enough to where I
Right.
realized that there was something beyond the drugs, because
Yeah.
I was dabbling with other things too. I definitely dabbled with opiates and a lot, lots of alcohol and
Escapist
uppers
drugs,
and
right?
downers. Yeah, just being
Yeah.
like, ultimately I was slick enough and young enough and scared enough to not
Or I
get
would say
addicted
euphoria
to anything.
drugs.
Yeah.
Artificial euphoria drugs. Whereas, yeah, it's like psychotropic,
Hmm.
in the sense of psychedelic drugs. Like I used to take them to have bad trips to remind myself not to fear waking life. You
And
know what
that's
I
a
mean?
great use of it, absolutely.
Yeah.
But my real addiction experience was getting off quitting the Klonopin. And
Yeah, the benzos. Yeah.
yeah, that was hard for sure. But overall, my just like self-medication continued from there, and I was like smart enough and scared enough. I don't even know, smart enough, just I didn't have enough time to go
Right.
fall
Yeah.
down the rabbit hole of getting really hooked on an opiate or something. But I was high all the time on different things, so it was just as much an issue. And um yeah, it again, all the catharsis and the sense of humility. And it's I've had times where, certain, like, there's that old people say, like, you got to look in the mirror, but they don't talk about what you need to be doing when you look in the mirror. And some of that is like what you're talking about with the bad trip, and how sometimes you just have to, sometimes it's on the tip of your tongue, it's at the threshold of your conscious mind, and you just have to sit and let it come and realize that you have been a bad person in one way or another, or you haven't been truthful or honest enough to yourself. You've been a disservice to yourself, however you want to put it, given the circumstances. And just that, sometimes that acceptance of how much you've screwed up, even if it's not always your fault, but just how much you've
Yeah.
contributed to screwing up and getting
Oh, it's
yourself
always
there.
my fault.
But people are afraid of that pain and that realization, but that really is like the threshold of alchemical transmutation. It's that release and that catharsis. And
Yeah. Yeah.
something I wanted to bring up for fun, is on this note, completely, is the guy who did the cover of the book Dive Manual. It's that illustrious sort of like chaos theory butterfly flap type thing.
Sure.
And
It's
he's
actually in the very faintly in the back of the thumbnail, if you did notice,
yeah, totally.
of the video. Yeah.
And for anyone who's interested, you could go check him out. He's on Spotify and YouTube. He's a rapper named Decca, and it's very he's produces it and his own lyrics and does his own album artwork. He's been around for a while, and a pretty solid underground following. Very esoteric, and in a way that's like really captivating. It's hard to not like him. So I encourage anyone to just go like check out a song or something. And he did that. He did the book cover
What is the
for
website again for him? Just real quick for everyone
mm,
listening.
it is,
Or how do you spell his name?
yeah, I could get you the website. I'll get you the website by the
Okay,
end of it.
awesome. Yeah.
But his name, you could type it into Spotify or wherever, Deca, Deca. And
Ooh.
and so he also is, this is something, I won't speak for the guy or anything, but this is something he talks about in his own art, is it, his recovery from opiates and things.
Mm-hmm.
And how his own journey, it was very similar to like you and me and plenty of the listeners, I'm sure, of that, everything we just talked about. And he used ayahuasca and other things as well.
Yeah, I've heard
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
Yeah, especially in trying to, aid in detoxification. I hear this a lot.
Hmm.
And just yeah, it's interesting. I would like to investigate it. But yeah, I do like the idea, and it makes sense being thrust into this inner dimension of all of the fucking things that make you drink or make you do drugs like
Hmm.
ayahuasca or What
That's the
did Carlos
definition of shadow.
Castaneda say? Dancing with the dog and
Yeah.
devil's weed, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
yeah, addiction
Mescalito, yeah,
recovery, yeah, it can't be done without shadow work. It's shadow
yeah,
work by definition, essentially. Um, so, and that's why I think in many cases, psychedelics are so useful. Because I think, and there's another good point to bring up. When you look into a lot of the psychedelic tradition, um, some of this is debatable, and I'm not an expert, and there are cases to be made, and I think more than enough evidence to show that it was actually used for quintessential like communion, if you will, like a
right,
sort of sacramentally. But in so many cases, like at least the competing for top use, if it if not at least like the definite primary secondary use is healing the sick soul thing that we're talking about. And people including myself talk about Jung a lot, but another for anyone who's interested in the psychology of the spiritual experience, the old psychologist William James, in
mm,
his work The Variety of Religious Experiences, it was like one of the first ever works, um, like right alongside the beginnings of Freud and before Jung, like while Jung was still coming up and studying, starting to really look into the hypnotic mechanisms of the religious and mystical experience, and going into perhaps the most fascinating part of that book, and something that still holds up today, is his psychological analysis of the like what you would call right and left-handed paths. Um,
right.
and this also goes to what I was talking about, different tools of the tool belt and how different aspects are going to suit different people, and how in the long run I think the only metric you should use, the only like universal one, is like the middle path. Essentially, you don't want either extremes.
Yeah,
um
that's a quote that stood out to me the most in your book, for sure, is that middle path. Yeah.
Well, that's one of the biggest benefits that I've had to, and also one of the things I've had to work on the most throughout the years, is reconciling the opposites within myself.
Yeah,
Mhm.
contradictory nature,
Yeah.
man. I
Yeah,
feel it
absolutely.
always. But I wanted to ask you too before we wrap up.
Mhm,
So I've been working on, slowly working. I do some articles for We the Hollowed here and there, but my I call my brand of magic, my anarchic magic, divergent magic, because it's magic that kind of communes with brain chemistry and high functioning autism, bipolar disorder, all of that,
mhm,
as like sort of the other,
mhm,
because brain chemistry really is just like oppressive, in the classical sense, like a demon that is oppressing, and you need to commune with it to work with it, right?
mhm,
And the science of someone's mind, or the chemistry of someone's mind, can be all encompassing. It's not something you have control over all the time. It can be enveloping, but at the same time, looking at it in this pragmatic sense. I almost said pragmatic sense, and I would have shot myself if I did. Um, but this pragmatic sense of, communing, yeah, with your brain chemistry as the other,
mhm.
to, kind of solve the riddles of the day, to use spare spells to get through the day, to help yourself, and all of this. And I just wanted to ask you, what do you think about, um, this idea of communing with brain chemistry as, quote unquote, the other?
That's really, you and like, your partner Eric, you guys both share the same
Eric
sentiments
Millar?
I do. Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah. Are you kidding me? Mundane magic? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And for anyone who doesn't know, I have Eric on board to be doing the cover for my upcoming work, which does not have a release date, but I can assure you will be coming out. That's going to be
Yes,
Hunt
we'll talk
Manual.
about Hunt Manual, but he is yeah, Eric Millar, my cohort, and We the Hollowed, and all the Oracle, um beautiful projects he does, is
Yeah.
actually doing Anthony's next book cover, which is so cool. That's like, yeah,
I can't
this
wait. Yeah,
full circle. Yeah.
yeah, and I really love his sense of surrealism and that like dark kind of like almost like a psychedelic Frank Miller-ish comic book vibe in many
Mm-hmm.
ways. It's great. But anyway,
Yeah.
about the brain chemistry and things, no, that's really that really touches that hits the nail on the head. And I think, another way, because that describes shadow work so well. And
Right.
it's, you got to remember both sides of the coin with shadow work. And like in a sense, without getting too corny, like it's both slaying the dragon and rescuing the damsel, right? Like, so you can't go run and gun, and you can't shake hands with everything you come across. There's that level of discernment.
Yeah.
Because in a lot of sense, having dealt with, like, which divergent magic, it's a nice term, and I think it fits it well. I could definitely say that I've worked with my brain chemistry in those same kinds of ways. And from my own experience, I can say that there are many times where, again, like a wounded child aspect of yourself, there's some healing that needs to be done and nurturing.
Right.
And then other
The
times,
Chiron, the wounded warrior.
hmm
Yeah.
and other times you got to draw a line in the sand and be like, this is such a maladaptive personality trait. I need to eradicate that. That's the dragon I need to slay. Um, and, um, that's, that is something I think, like, th- that's the whole piece of what you would call individuation in the long run,
Sure.
that whole Jungian sentiment.
And I would
It,
also, say, I'm not saying like, divergent magic as a praxis only, you know what I mean, to commune with the other. Like this would
oh, I totally get
obviously
you.
be in tandem with therapy,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
and maybe less harmful, even though that's hard. Some people need them,
Well,
such as I did for a long time, but harmful pharmaceuticals. It
mhm.
just is,
And
So,
but that's a great point that I think more people, I hope more people eventually become aware of, and I think more people are, is that these belief structures and the way that we commune with these aspects of our psyche and go about interacting with these physics of the psyche, um it's 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 so it's a fundamental part of the human experience in the long run. And in some sense, you're going to be doing it whether you realize it or not. And that's why it's good to like learn the tools of the trade, because you're on a moving train, and like if you're not conducting it, then someone else will be, proverbially.
right.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
learn what's going on. And excuse me, learn, like you got to learn to separate the wheat from the chaff. And
Yep.
yeah, I mean, that's really what it boils down to in the long run. And I really don't think that you can think, well, part of the reason that um the shadow work is so crucial is the alchemical process denotes that you have to go about the purification process before you can really work with the light in any sort of more purified way. Otherwise, it's just going to be diluted. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think, yeah, I just, it means, I think, to me, in a pragmatic sensibility to, there's it's just astounding, the studies of, people that are, I don't know if it's just better science or if it's just, loose gunned diagnoses, but there's certainly, we are all confined within this web of culture and identity, even online, and shit is affecting us in ways that we've never known before, you
Mhm,
know
mhm,
and yeah, I just feel like it's important to like really survey just these modicums of social media, these interpersonal dialogues on the internet, these less interaction with people given the last year. It's we are all under this, right? We're
Mhm.
all under this sheer, or like this veneer tarp above it, and all of us are being affected differently. It's raining spiders in different ways, you know?
Yeah.
And like I just think it's important that we, instead of, maybe as you say in dive manual, like especially speaking about the individuation process, maybe don't dive without being prepared, but also like
Right.
work in tandem, right,
Right.
with modern science.
Absolutely.
um and yeah.
Um, I'll leave. I know you're familiar with it since you've read the book. I'll leave the listeners with an anecdote that just really ties it all together. And it's the whole phantoms in the brain, the whole phantom
Right.
limb thing, where, long story short, people, after studies done in the book Phantoms in the Brain by V.S. Ramachandran, it goes through a lot of different material, but we learn that people who experience phantom limb, whether through amputation or born without the limb, that they'll experience this weird calloused phantom limb pain, and that through control methods, we find that the majority of people can and will actually experience relief by reflecting the by putting the reflection of their real limb into the place where their limb is missing. And it's this definition of this heuristic, sort of shamanistic um, practice, these methods in practice through the lens of the scientific method. And people actually did receive, especially going and exercising it like you would go to the gym, people received lasting results and diminishment of the phantom limb and things. And there's other examples where you can see that dreams are very similar, where it's this almost sort of reflection, this projection highlight of intention inside you, and it's through this reflection process we're able to animate ourselves in new ways that we weren't able to fulfill in our regular everyday life. And that's how psychedelics and art, all these things, these like quote unquote transpersonal states of consciousness, the thing that allows you to get outside of the box in your head. um it really is highlighting these otherwise inanimate but existent parts of your psyche. And a lot of it is, that's why, like, sometimes the pageantry and the theatrics and the like ritual and ceremony of these things is so crucial. Like, it's all the steps that are so important.
I love it. Yeah, and you've always been really good about that, and erudite, very dexterous, I think, with your vernacular, especially through Dive Manual, to kind of reiterate that.
Thanks,
You
thank
know
you
what I
very much.
mean? And for all of you listening, thank you to Sixth Sense who put links in the chat. Yeah, check it out. Can you get Dive Manual on paperback or like printed?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's actually on Amazon. You can get it in ebook, you can get it paperback, or I actually was lucky enough, I don't know how it works, but I was lucky enough to be selected for the hardback beta. So you
Oh,
can get a hardback if you want. So that's around. But yeah, yeah, so you can get any three, and you can go and on divemind.net. I got all the interviews that I've done thus far. I post them when they're recorded and released up there. You can find me on Twitter, DiveMind667, or Facebook, Anthony Tyler. Like, I'm always happy to engage in discourse with anybody. And yeah, I mean, this is really what it's all about. It's cool to sell books. I mean, why wouldn't it be
sure.
cool? But I really truly just love these conversations and talking with like-minded people and expanding on ideas. It's really, it's part of like the true zest of life. So
We
thanks.
would not be doing ourselves a service if we didn't talk about the forthcoming Hunt Manual, which is your next book. So if you can give like a little rundown about that. We know Eric Millar of Outlet Press and We the Hollowed is doing the cover, which you couldn't have asked for a better cover artist.
I
So
agree.
you already win. Um, but yeah, tell us more about, just a little bit about Hunt Manual.
Absolutely. So I really, and I think this is also kind of like my Piscean nature in a way, and the opposites. So Dive Manual is very much uh, focused on mm, self-development and like positivity essentially through getting through some of the darker things um that are sprinkled throughout. And hunt manuals kind of is going to be that flipped on its head. It's going to be an extension of dive manual, and it's going to be written in the same format essentially, but this is going to be mostly very dark with the end result being very light. Meaning that this is all,
Interesting.
instead of just touching on shadow work a little bit, this is going to be all about shadow work. And um it's going to get a lot into overt demonology, and I'm going to touch on 4T and unexplainable phenomena a lot more, because part of the pitch is like, from my standpoint, and I think the evidence is very uh glaring the more you look into it, that a lot of this 4T and phenomena, um similar to mystical experience, has a realism to it, but realism isn't the right word. It's like surrealism. There's like a relevance to it, but I'm not sure how physical these things are in the grand scheme. And regardless of how physical they are, what you can certainly say is that all of this that we're talking about, expelling tension through animation of these repressed aspects of our psyche, um, unexplainable phenomena in general, certainly plays a component in that, in shadow work. And it's just as a cherry on top, for example,
Yeah.
it's this really is not just my idea. It's something that's been kicked around for a while, but hasn't been touched on fully. But it really is the full meaning behind the definition of the title, the Mothman prophecies that John Keel wrote about.
Oh yeah.
That was his best guess as to what the Mothman and all that unexplainable phenomena was. It was some sort of basically shadow work, collective projection of things that could have essentially served as like a genie in a bottle to other things. And maybe part of this collective, like psychical projection, if you will, actually attracted some things, and we started getting some legitimate, strange, potentially metaphysical phenomena. So, food for thought,
Yeah.
guys.
I
Food for
love
thought.
that stuff. I mean, that's actually, you were on a podcast recently. We were chatting as you were a guest in the chat about the shared projection.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I
And
love it. I love it.
oh, Genocide asks, Lavenda finally acknowledged that he is Simon. Thoughts? Do you know what he's talking about?
No, I don't know everything.
Yeah.
I don't know that one.
Yeah. It's I think it's Simon. Was it Simon the something? I forget. Also, yeah, I'm happy. Listen, I'm happy to talk about UFOs till the sun comes up. I just feel like everyone's gonna do that already. Like, let's just let more able-bodied, understanding and governmental knowledgeable people talk about the report that came out. So thank you
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
us letting just taking a break. I said when you wrote that tweet, I was like, holy shit, Anthony knows me, man. He's like, he called that shit.
Yeah, no doubt. I was feeling it too. Like, people will at least see in Dive Manual very briefly that, I've seen some weird flying things in the sky in Alaska, but I've never seen aliens. And I really think it has a lot more to do with the stuff we talked about, a lot of like collective, unconscious shadow work type things. And I think
Yeah,
there could be a physical relevance to them, which is something I'm sure we'll get into a little more next time, because that's like a whole different chunk of interesting material.
that's the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Oh, John's saying Simon Necronomicon. And real quick, Roth, my buddy Stevie from Scotland asked, does Anthony do evocatory magic at all?
um, that would be invoke and evoke.
Yeah,
Sometimes when I'm not looking at them,
evoke.
I get them mixed up. Invoke would be um more like prayer, right? And then evoke would be more of like, quote unquote, like a
Evoke
conjuring
would be
type thing.
commuting outside. Yeah, invoke would be commuting inside.
Yeah, well, this is something we can get to more in the next conversation,
Yeah,
but I'd be happy to touch on it real quick. What I do is, like, I don't know, like mystical hypnosis. You know what I mean? I sit down in meditation, and I go through cleansing and my ceremony and ritual, and then I essentially the point is to go through priming techniques to get yourself to this state of genuine animated suspended disbelief where in this, for lack of a better term, this transpersonal dream state, you're allowing aspects of yourself to communicate with you autonomously. And as we'll probably get into next time, I don't think that's where the trail of breadcrumbs ends. I think projection is the first step, and I think sometimes that can be where it ends, and sometimes in deeper cases it's the kind of proverbial genie in the bottle for greater forces of nature and things.
Yeah, and that circles back to what we were talking about before, just the communion as a whole, and
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
what is the other? Is it outside? Is it inside?
Probably some of
Evoke,
both.
invoke. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anthony, it is a pleasure. People purchase Dive Mind. Hopefully he gets a hardback cover,
Oh,
because
it's out
that
there. You can
is.
get a
Oh,
hardback
you
now.
can?
Heck
That's
yeah.
awesome. I
Yeah.
will I will get one as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, look out for Hunt Manual. I'm sure I'll talk to. I don't know when your Hunt Manual is
Mm,
slated
definitely
to be
closer to
released.
the end of the year. So keep your eyes
Yeah, yeah.
peeled, but don't hold your breath yet. But I can
Okay,
assure you it's
cool.
coming out. No, no
Well,
question.
and I want to invite you too, if you want to post on We the Hollowed. We have a big community, international community of people posting journalistic articles and music and art and everything on it. Please send me anything you'd like. I would love to post it. The only thing that ties it is, just a kind of journey into the metaphysical, but it can be a picture of your mom's car seat. I don't
Awesome.
care.
Wonderful. I appreciate it, man. I'll definitely take you up on that. And
All right.
thank you very much. You've been a very gracious host, and this was very fun. And I appreciate you reading the book and all your kind words. And thanks for
Of
everybody
course,
listening.
man. Hey, we got to stick together.
Absolutely.
Really, yeah, really appreciate you. Take care and haunt on, Anthony.
Yeah, likewise. Take care, everybody.